Welcome to the Probate Realtor Show, your one source for selling and buying real estate through trust and probate. Hear directly from the best attorneys and trusted advisors on how executors and administrators navigate the probate process in and out of court. Being a personal representative or successor trustee can be a daunting task, and often beneficiaries don't have a clear plan. Let us help you make the right decision for your clients, your family, and your legacy. And now, here's your host, the probate realtor himself, Matias Baker Masucci.
Welcome, everybody, to another very exciting episode of our show. Today, we have the privilege of hosting Jen Meyer. Jen, welcome to the show. Jen,
thank you, Matias. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Jen is an estate planning attorney, and I've done a little research on her, and she is got so much information. So I encourage everybody to look her up. Her firm is Meyer Estate Law, and the website is danapointwills.com. And another thing that I wanted to mention is that her YouTube channel is awesome. So please do check that out. Jan, let's get right into it. The meat of our conversation. The first thing I wanted to talk to you about is business succession. And that's one of the things that when people do estate planning, often they overlook what that entails. So can you kind of tell our audience, first of all, what is business succession planning and how do you go about, making sure that it's included in your estate plan?
Absolutely. So, hi, everyone. So business succession really is the idea that you have a plan in place of what's going to happen with your business if you were to become incapacitated, if you were to retire, and of course, when you pass away. Okay. A business succession plan is something that every business should have, whether or not you have partners in your business, but especially if you have partners in your business, you want to have had this conversation with your partners about what you see happening with the business. Is it going to continue beyond those life events? And who's going to be in charge of continuing that? If your business is one that has a specialized license, you want to make sure that that is accounted for, right? So for example, me as an attorney, only another attorney can take over my practice,
right.
So we want to be making sure that we are keeping that in mind and having a plan in place. And so some of this can be done working with a business attorney. But when clients come to us and we're doing the estate planning, we, of course, one of the questions that we have on our questionnaire is, do you have a business and what kind of business? How is that business formed? What's the formation? Is it a sole prop, an LLC? Because that will dictate how we handle it. For businesses, like for example, a sole proprietorship, we can transfer your business into your trust. If it is a corporation, we have to look at what kind of corporation it is. Is it a small corp? Is it an S corp? Because that also means that with an S corp, we have to put specialized language in our documents to allow for our trustees to be able to know how to handle the taxation of those entities. LLC interest, we can transfer the membership interest into the trust. But beyond that, we also have to make sure that the organizational documents, your bylaws, your operating agreement allows for that. Because not all operating agreements, not all of those kind of documents do. So we take a look at that and we make sure that it allows for the transfer of those documents into your trust, those assets, into your trust. But the one thing that we do not want to do is not do anything at all, Right. We want to make sure that we are approaching it. So that's kind of what we do, It's like we're very proactive in making sure that we know about our clients' businesses. And like I mentioned, it's like where there's a specialized license required, we make sure that your trust and your power of attorney documents are addressing that, especially if your trustee doesn't have that license or your agent doesn't have that license, we require them to hire someone to make sure that they can, that you have someone who's authorized to be able to keep that business going, if that is the case, because not all businesses can continue. And so that's also a conversation that we have, is this a business that can continue beyond your passing? And is this a business that we can sell? And if it is a business that we can sell, do we have to sell this business within a period of time? Like I've had some clients where it's like the business will start to lose value as it sits, and so we have to make sure that we sell it within like the first year, for example. And so knowing that ahead of time allows us to put provisions in your trust to ensure that these things happen when the time comes for it to happen. So
that makes total sense. Thank you very much for explaining that. Let's pick a few things from what you said that I wanted to talk about. First of all, the type of entity that somebody has. It's, we can go from people who have basically a sole proprietorship. They have done nothing. And I've seen big businesses, even with people that, they didn't do any corporate planning, anything of any sort. And then we have things like limited partnership, which are a little bit less, those agreements are like, those partnership agreements can be a little bit more complex. And then we have,
yeah.
obviously in California, the LLCs, and then you have your S Corp and your C Corp and all of those things. So my question to you is, what type of entities are the ones that people have to be more careful with when it comes to planning for succession?
I would say partnerships, or any kind of business where you have other people involved in it.
Right.
And it's like we have clients and they're like, oh yeah, I have a business with my family member, for example. And I'm like,
Right.
that's wonderful that you and your family have a business together. Like, do you guys have a succession plan in place? Because the things that you want to be thinking about when you have a partner involved is one, like I mentioned earlier, who's going to continue the business if you were to if you wanted to retire? Is there money in the business to cover that, the retirement, the death, the disability of the business? Who are you in the business? Are you the main person? And also it's like if it's a business that has like, interest, for example, what happens to that interest? Does your business partners have the ability, have the right to a right of first refusal to purchase those shares? Or will your family member become a member or a participating member in that business? And do your business partners want to have your family member become a member of that business? So I would say like any business where you have other people involved in it, it is so much more important to have a plan in place of what's going to happen. If you were to become, again, it's like the three big are retired, disabled, and disabled or incapacitated, and passing, dying.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And another things that I guess comes from this is some people's life change. People change their plans, things change, and so something that I wanted to discuss with you is a lot of mom and pop's business, we call them, even that some are very successful. We can say, my children are going to take over my business, and that's the plan. Lo and behold, the children grow up and they say, you know what, I'm sorry, but I don't want to do that, dad or mom. I'm going to do something else. How do you adjust for that? And, basically, when it comes time, if somebody makes a plan and then they're still alive and they have to make the changes to that plan, when it comes to business succession changes, how do the clients approach you, and how do you help them making sure that they could take a different course?
So it really does depend on the business and of course, what kind of plan has been put in place. So if there's actually a formal business succession plan in place, and it was created by a business attorney, because it's like as an estate plan attorney, there's only what we know. It's like we know the estate planning part of things. And unless you are an estate planning attorney who also does business law, it is best to have your clients do these business succession plans with their business attorney. So I will, my job in a situation like that would be, okay, let's take a look at what the changes that you'd like to make. Let's go through them. And then let's have you go to your business attorney and have the business succession plan updated according to those changes. And then what we do on our end with the estate planning is we would make sure the estate plan now reflects those changes.
Right.
So for example, that you gave where the clients are like, oh, my kid's gonna, take over the business. If your estate plan reflects that the business goes to a child, then we're gonna have to change that in your estate plan. Right. And I generally try to advise my clients on thinking a couple of steps ahead beyond their now, so to your point, during initial consultation, I would be asking, so what happens if your child does not want to take over the business?
Right.
Let's make sure that we're thinking through that right now so that we're accounting for that. Is there someone else in the business that could take it on? And can we start to put those things, those building blocks in place so that if it were to happen in the future, we already have some stuff in there. The idea being that not everyone comes back to make changes to the estate plans. And so we
Right.
want to make sure that we are addressing that. Or somebody could pass away before they've been able to make a change into the estate plan. And we now have a situation like you just mentioned. So really it's, it's like if you have a formal plan in place, making sure that, you have it done with your business attorney, but also making sure that your estate planning documents reflect those changes. And then, of course, if there are formation documents, operating agreements, and bylaws, you want to make sure that you're updating those as well to reflect the changes that you're making in all of those documents. We want all of those documents to be working together.
That makes total sense. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, let's talk about one of the things, on the broader sense of estate planning. One of the misconceptions that I think people deal with quite often is the loss of control, meaning that they say, you know what, I don't want to lose control. I mean, I can speak for my own family. My grandfather was so old school. He did zero estate planning. I mean, this is back in Italy. And obviously, things didn't end up going the way he wanted. And I remember this line, I've shared it before. He said, I'm not going to have a will. I kid you not. He said, I'm not going to have a will because then my kids may want me dead because I have a will. And I'm like, what? What difference does it make? Well, it's like, but that's very old school mentality. So we know that there's a lot of underserved areas and people that, that are successful, but are afraid to lose control. So how do you help clients understand that it won't be the case?
So one of the beautiful things, one of the things that we use in our practice, one of the most common things that we use in our practice is the revocable trust, right? And the revocable trust is all about you exercising control over your estate. And because it is revocable, it means that you continue to be able to exercise that control over your life. I tell my clients to see a revocable trust like an LLC, right? You've created this business, this entity, but anything that the entity creates is passed on to you. It means that nothing changes in your life at all. You create, you add your, for example, you add your home into your revocable trust. You change the title, but the title still is your name as trustee of your trust.
Right.
You can sell that property as if it is or wasn't in the trust. You can purchase new property and put it in there. All of the income generated will be on your 1040. Your social security number is the tax ID number for that trust. And so I think explaining the actuality of how that works for people is very helpful in dispelling the idea that creating an estate plan means you're seceding control of your estate. You're not doing that.
Right.
There are going to be types of trust where that is a component, right? But that is an irrevocable trust. And often enough, you don't see it in an everyday plan.
Right.
That is the kind of things that we see in much more high net worth, much more complex planning. So I think it's like taking away the mystery of exactly what happens, helps people realize, well, okay, sounds good. So it's still mine. I'm like, absolutely 100% still yours.
Exactly. That makes total sense. Good. Let's talk about some of the challenges you encounter in your practice. What are some of the things that you have difficulty with, or not difficulty with, but what do you think are some of the challenges when your clients come to you that require a little bit more attention than other things?
Let's see. I think people come into estate planning with every client comes in and says, I have a simple estate, right? And so that generally, the mentality of the simplicity of people's lives is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. Okay, so let's actually explore this. Tell me about your family, and once people start to talk about their families, it'll be like, okay, so we're married, it's like my husband's got 2 kids, they're not my kids, and then I've got 2 kids, and then not my husband's kids, and then, it's like we've got these assets over here, and these are the assets over here, and we're gonna do this thing with the assets, and this other thing, and it's like, I'm like, this is not a simple estate, it's like, it's like our lives are a lot more complex than we think. And then you throw things in, such as like, planning for people with like young kids.
Hmm.
I think planning for kids with disabilities, that also
Right.
becomes like, challenging. And a lot of the times we're doing the work. So we're not thinking about, well, what happens when we're not there to do the work, but
Right.
somebody else has got to do it for us. And so I think it's really the biggest challenge, if we have to say a challenge, is really combating the mindset that our clients come into estate planning with,
Right.
and really educating them about the different factors that affect their estate, affect the administration of their estate. And one of the benefits that my clients have is I do administrations as well. I do probates, I do trust administrations, which means that I get to see the things that have gone wrong in administration and bring it back into my planning and say, okay, so here's how we're going to make your plan better. And I educate them on what the administration side looks like, so they're understanding why we need to do certain things in their plan when we're planning, because we're trying to avoid those problems in the future. So mindset is a really big part of it. And a lot of that mindset is formed by what people absorb, from their friends, from their neighbors, from the internet.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
That makes, yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, it's great that we talked about trust administration, because that's, and you make a very good point. When you do trust administration, the trust activates, you're dealing with a successor trustee, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see, the things that could have been done better, and then you can bring that back into your practice, which I think it's actually a great asset, for an estate planner to also do trust administration. That is very, very important. The other thing is, because you don't leave your clients, the ones who you do the estate planning for, you don't leave them in the to fend by themselves. You're your estate plan. Best of luck with it. So that's very good. Now we started talking about business. Our conversation began with business. Let's bring it back there a little bit and just expand on a few things. There's a difference between business assets and personal assets. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is asset protection, right? If the assets, sometimes people have business assets which are holding their personal name and things like that. And we all know that if in California, if you're over a certain amount, pretty much any real estate you own, if it's not in a trust and it's not in an entity's name, and if it's in a personal name, it's probably going to have to go through probate. So how is the approach to essentially make the client understand, how does the asset protection work, both in the business environment as well as in the personal environment?
Okay. Asset protection as it relates to creditors or as it relates to probate? Because those things are like, yeah.
Yes, true. Let's talk about actually both of them. The
Okay.
creditors is one of the things, and then we can talk about the probate.
Yeah. So I would say, so when it comes to asset protection, especially your business assets, having an entity is very important, and having an entity that provides you with that protection. So, it's like a sole proprietor. Even if you own a business and you own business assets, you have no protection. So if someone, like, if there's a creditor who's going to come after you, that creditor is not going to stop just at your business assets. The creditor can actually come after your personal assets as well, because you don't have an entity separating you from your business, right? Unlike someone with an LLC or a C Corp, that there is an entity, and that entity gives and provides you that protection of limited liability. So if it is a business liability, a business creditor, then the creditor can actually, they sue the company, and they may try to sue you personally, but really, as long as you've created your entity in a way that is going to, and those protections are secure, you're keeping your minutes like you're supposed to, you're doing all the things, all the business things that will protect, that is intended to protect, and create that, like, shield. As long as you can keep that shield up, then your personal assets are protected from your business creditors, right?
Right.
And so I think it's really important for people to understand that it's like you have to create some kind of entity, and an entity that is geared and created to protect your personal assets, and that, and have your business assets be the only thing that can be touched in the event of a creditor. And so one of the things that can be utilized in estate planning to provide an asset protection would be an irrevocable trust.
Mhm.
Assets in an irrevocable trust, that's where you're severing that control. For
Mhm.
most irrevocable, and an irrevocable trust is a trust that is created that is very difficult or impossible to revoke. And
Mhm.
there's different kinds that are created for multiple different purposes. But generally speaking, these kind of assets come with creditor protection, because if the assets are in the irrevocable trust, in order for you to have that protection, you are severing your control over it. So if someone's going to sue you, if you've done something and the person is suing you, they cannot go after the assets in the irrevocable trust. Our garden variety revocable trust, which allows you to retain control over your assets, would not give you that kind of protection. So, when we're looking at, so that may be one of the reasons why you may see an irrevocable trust in a client's estate, is because we're trying to protect that. I have clients with substantial real estate holdings that, and those real estate assets are assets that are being rented, for example. They're income generating assets.
Mhm.
There's a lot of liability that may surround these kind of assets. You will see clients like that with LLCs built into them, and the LLCs there solely to hold those income generating assets to provide the client with that asset protection. Those are complex, and there's a lot of like factors into whether we're going to create an LLC or not, with the for holding those assets. So it's not like I want to make sure that I'm not, giving the idea that yes, if you have, income generating real estate, definitely do an LLC. You definitely want to make sure that you're getting advice, because every person's like situation is unique and different. But
Yes.
generally speaking, you will typically see clients with substantial real estate holdings that income generating with LLCs to hold those, so that they can have that protection, because the revocable trust doesn't give them that. And in terms of probate protection, the revocable trust is one of the best ways to avoid it. So a lot of people will create a will with the idea that my will is going to keep me out of probate. And I'm just like, your will is almost a sure fire way that you're going to end up in probate. So because the will has to be probated if the estate is above a certain amount.
Yeah.
And so having your assets funded into your revocable trust is one of the best ways to avoid probate, because a revocable trust is going to be administered privately and not in the court system. So yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you. Let's talk about your journey. My audience is always very interested about how did you arrive at practicing, estate planning and trust administration and probate.
So it's very interesting, because when I first thought of wanting to be an attorney, I was 6 years old
Oh,
on
wow, that's awesome.
on a Caribbean island that did not have beyond a 2-year university.
Wow.
So there was not even a 4-year university. It was just like, but I wanted to be an attorney. And I remember thinking to myself as I got older and I stuck to that, it's like, I was like, I want to be an attorney. I want to be an attorney. I want to be an attorney. It was like, what kind of attorney do I want to be? I thought I was going to be a corporate attorney. I
Okay.
wanted to work in Manhattan, because my family immigrated from St. Lucia to Brooklyn, New York.
Mhm.
And so, it's like you're in Manhattan, you see all the big buildings, and I was like, I am going to be a corporate attorney, and I'm going to wear fancy suits and high heels. I'm going to work for a Fortune 500 company. Like that was the dream. And so, all through high school and college, whenever someone asked me, I would say, "You're a corporate attorney. I'm going to work for a Fortune 500 company." And I went to law school, and law school has a way of disabusing us of the ideas that we have in our heads, the things that we create. And
Right.
so when I went to law school, I already had my 2 kids. My daughter was 9 months old when I started law school, and my son was 4. And one of the hardest things for me starting law school was realizing that I was having to, there were a lot of the times I had this to be a Fortune 500, lawyer, you have to be in the top 10% of your graduating class.
Mhm.
You can do it other ways, but that's one of the surefire ways to do it. And
Right.
so, I was aspiring for that and realized that it meant that I was missing my kids' plays and I was not
Right.
able to be there on the weekends and I was coming home late at nights and I was stuck in my office studying and I was like, gosh, this is not the kind of mom I want to be. And if I'm doing that while in law school, then what's going to happen when I come out of law school and actually have a career and I have a boss who's telling me what I can't do, dictating my life, right?
Mhm.
And so I really had to kind of like, I had to kind of like, grapple with that. And being a corporate attorney had been such a big part of my identity that I had to really, it was like going to my professors and crying and being like, how do I do this? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Wow.
Like, how do I be the mom I want to be to my children? But also be an attorney who is there for my clients. How do I balance that life? And so we started to look at my classes and how I was doing. And properties, which is a first year law school class, it was one of my favorite classes. The idea of playing with people's assets and figuring out like black acre and this percentage of this and all of the issues that came up in those classes, my mind just took to them. And so where everyone else was bored with this class, I loved it. And so I took more estate planning classes and realized I actually love the idea of helping people to create a plan. And of course, the more I understood about estate planning, the more I fell in love with estate planning. And I think being a mom, a young mom, was also very helpful for me because, it's like when you're listening to people and kids are fighting and all of this stuff and families are being like, falling apart because there's no estate planning. I wanted to be able to help people avoid that. How do we avoid your family that you work so hard to keep close from falling apart? How do we protect the assets that you're working so hard to create and amass? How do we protect that for the next generation? you know, and being a Black person in this country and also in St. Lucia, where we never talk about estate planning, like, it's like people
Right.
just like your grandfather, people just like, die. And then they're like, all right, we're going to figure out it's like, what are we going to do with this? I wanted to also figure out how do we help create that generational wealth? How do we go
Right.
from this step and have the next generation not starting here, but they're starting here? And how do they, so it's like the more I learned about it, the more I understood how powerful, like not just estate planning, but proper estate planning
Right.
can, how powerful it can be. And so created my practice right out of law school because I didn't want to do anything else. And I was interviewing for jobs and I was competing against, 20-year-olds with no children. And I was coming into the firm with my, now a, 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so, it was tough in 2020, no, actually, sorry, 2010,
Mm.
trying to, get an estate planning job in the middle of a recession. And I'm competing against like, people who don't come with my baggage. And so I created my own estate planning firm. And 13 years later, still doing it. And I was very lucky to have had one of my first clients in estate planning. And lucky in the sense that I wasn't happy that his wife had passed away. But the client's wife passed away relatively after I created the estate plan, and he asked me to administer the estate. And so very early on in my practice, I was administering
Yeah.
the estate. It was pretty complicated. And what happened was when he passed away, I did his. And then when his son, so I did it for the son. And then so it's like, you got to do all this stuff. And then again, realizing the importance of, it's like, okay, we have this plan that we create. And then I got to see how it was administered, down the road and be like, okay, how do we take that and then make this better? And so that's how I ended up doing estate planning and trust administrations. And then the probate kind of just like comes as part of the package, right? I was working for an attorney when I first started here doing my practice, and he became my unofficial mentor. He wasn't trying to be my mentor, but it became that way because I was like creating my practice and he hired me to work for him. And I learned probates from him. And so when I was fully on my own, I felt confident to take on the probates. And so for almost 13 years, I've been doing all three of them and absolutely love what I do.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing such an inspirational story. Really, I love it. From a little girl in St. Lucia all the way, through Brooklyn, and then, I love it. It's really a great story. Thank you for that. Before I let you go, can you tell? We're gonna have your contact information, obviously, in our show notes for people that have questions and want to reach out and need help with your area of practice. But I want you to tell our audience what is the best way to get a hold of you.
Absolutely. Calling my office is the best way to get a hold of me. Our number is 949-607-9412. My receptionist will go ahead and schedule you with a 15-minute complimentary consultation. I am pretty punctual. I'll call you at the time. If it's on my calendar, it's going to happen. And during this call, we address any general questions that people have about estate planning. We help you, we kind of get a sense of where you are. I tell people this is an interview. You get to actually figure out if you like and trust me to help you with the process. And then I get to find out if I can actually help you, before you get committed and you pay for a consultation. And so I encourage everyone to take advantage of the 15 minutes. It's like you don't have to pay for it. You get to have an attorney on a call with you for
Yeah.
15 minutes. That's not going to cost you anything. So, take advantage of those 15 minutes and, figure out where you are in the process, and dispel some of the myths that you come into the process with. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the audience that has stayed with us in this episode. Goodbye, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Probate Realtor Show. Find more episodes and interact with us at probaterealtor.la. That's probaterealtor.la. Listen, ask questions, and get results. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The Probate Realtor Matias Baker Masucci is a licensed real estate broker in California, DRE number 020547763. Any legal information provided is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. Contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal issue or problem. We make no guarantees as to the accuracy of any information. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.